Hi, my name is Chloe Rainiac.
And I'm Coyla Pearson. Welcome to our first ever broadcast of Fair Dinkum Nature. Today, we'll be discussing buoyancy.
Buoyancy is an upward force exerted by a fluid that opposes the weight of an immersed object.
Like on a fish or a platypus.
Animals on land
And marine.
have developed some pretty awesome traits in order to survive and thrive in our world.
Fish, they have swim bladders. Swim bladders are kind of like balloons. They inflate and they deflate. It's a gas-filled cavity with flexible walls. A swim bladder has multiple purposes. One is for buoyancy. The more gas, the more buoyant the fish. And when the gas is expelled, the fish sinks in the water column. According to the water pressure, a fish can regulate its swim bladder so that it ascends and descends. It's important for the fish to be able to maintain neutral buoyancy in ever-changing hydrostatic pressure.
But how does that work? Lactic acid is released from the gas gland, making the environment and the capillaries acidic, therefore lowering hemoglobin's affinity for O2, releasing it into the swim bladder.
As you can see, the swim bladder is located right below the spine. It's able to expand and contract depending on where the fish is in order to maintain a neutral buoyancy.
Lactic acid is released from the gas gland, making the environment and the capillaries acidic, therefore lowering hemoglobin's affinity for O2 and releasing it into the swim bladder. There's a lot of diversity in swim bladders. In cyprinidaes, the swim bladder is two-chambered. Gas enters through a thick-walled section and is reabsorbed in a thin-walled section. Other fish have an oval, special secretory section of the swim bladder that can be closed off via muscles.
Wow, what a mind trip! The structural diversity of swim bladder morphology is remarkable. Apart from buoyancy, swim bladders can also function as a means of producing and receiving sound. They vibrate.
Fair dinkum.
Fair dinkum.
Baby, I'm hot, like the prodigal son.
Dolphins, along with whales, have melons. The melons sit right behind the forehead. They channel air in and out of columns, and it sounds like this. They use that sound to echolocate. Scientists used to think that it was the same as a swim bladder, but now we know it's not. Fair dinkum!
That's it.
Just like all mammals, except for those that don't, whales are warm-blooded, give birth to live young, have hair, and produce milk to feed their babies. Whale milk is the most fat-rich type of milk, with a 50% fat concentration, and a consistency like toothpaste. Toothpaste? Blue whale calves, which grow up to be the largest mammal on the planet, drink up to 150 gallons a day. 150. The more fat, the more blubber. The more blubber, the more insulation. The more insulation, the more apt the animal is to conserve the energy. Since whales are endothermic and the ocean is way colder than the body temperature, they need a thick layer of blubber for thermal regulation.
This extra fatty layer does more than just keep the whale nice and toasty.
It aids in buoyancy, just like how a stand-up paddleboard floats way better than a little shortboard. Same concept with marine mammals and blubber. The density of lipid is lower than the density of seawater, so the blubber is less dense, which makes it more buoyant. The blubber contributes a defined percentage of volume to the mammal's overall volume.
That's so rad.
I know, so rad. Also, the density and the viscosity of the lipids changes with water temperature. As the water gets colder or deeper, the oily state turns into a crystalline state, just like how coconut oil turns to a solid state from a liquid state as it cools down, which will increase density. The more solid the substance, the more dense it is. The more dense, the more apt an object is to sink. Water depth isn't the only constituent that influences temperature. It's proposed that in pinnipeds, which are seals and sea lions, heat transfer and heat exchange is achieved by seawater intake through the nasal openings. So for these marine mammals, they are able to regulate their buoyancy levels, just like a fish with a swim bladder.
Fur is an example of an adaptation in mammals. To be able to fully gain an understanding of how fur adapts depending on the needs of an animal, we must first understand that there are two types of fur, the undercoat and the guard hair. The undercoat is shorter and denser, and its primary function is to thermoregulate. Its job is to maintain a layer of air against skin and to repel water. The guard hair is longer and coarser, and it shows the color of an animal, especially in terms of camouflage, and it sheds water and blocks the sun, protecting the undercoat from many different external factors.
Look over there. Some terrestrial mammals, who are partially aquatic, are also adapted for buoyancy. Semi-aquatic mammals, such as polar bears, platypi, river otters, and beavers, have fur that traps air. An increased hair density, combined with a large number of kinks and interlocking cuticular scales, is what makes it possible for the hair to trap the gas molecules. Once submerged in water, the trapped air works like little buoys, working together to keep the animal buoyant. Their fur is waterproof. The fur is made waterproof by oil, much like the oil that coats our hair.
There are three adaptations that we see in semi-aquatic marine animals. The first one is fur. As we look at polar bears and otters, we can see that they have a vast amount of fur. Why is this? It's because they don't use blubber, our second adaptation, to keep themselves warm. Their primary thermoregulatory feature is fur.
Here, right behind me, you have one of Australia's trademark venues, a billabong. One of the animals that loves to hang out in billabongs is your one and only platypus. If you look closely, we might see one. Look for any little movement. Let's look.
Platypus fur is extremely fine and even denser than that of polar bears and river otters, with 600 to 900 hairs covering each square millimeter of skin. Platypus fur also has two layers, a woolly undercoat and its longer shiny guard hairs, which work together to trap a layer of air next to the skin, keeping most of the animal's body dry, even when diving.
Which makes it buoyant.
We just got back from a dive with polar bears, and what's really interesting is that although they're great swimmers, they're terrible divers. And a reason this may be is that their fur is hollow and they have very dense amounts of it. So their buoyancy is very high, making it hard for them to dive. Cetacea and Sirenia both use blubber instead of fur as their primary insulator. Why do they do this? They're mammals, and mammals are supposed to have fur, right? Well, they've adapted to their oceanic environments. They invaded the aquatic habitat 50 million years ago in the early Eocene period, meaning that they don't have a need for fur, and so they've slowly adapted out of it.
Well, my left hand's free. Well, my left hand's free.
Pinnipeda are our special animals today because they use both. They use both fur and fat as their insulators. They have dense waterproof fur and a moderate amount of blubber. Sea lions use just blubber to retain their heat. We notice a trend and a decreased reliance on fur for insulation and more of a reliance on blubber. We hope we kept you interested and engaged throughout our pilot episode of Dinkum Nature.
We had a great time with all these cool animals, exhibiting buoyancy in different ways, either through their swim bladders, blubber, or fur. Stay tuned for our next episode of Dinkum Nature.
Well, my left hand's free. Well, my left hand's free. Well, my left hand's free. Oh, no. Ain't shitty, baby, I'm hot like the prodigal son.
Check out the platypus there.
Ah!
It's running in the billabong.